Welcome to Stuff and Nonsense. This is Journaling with Julie, Episode 2, Artistry. I've taken a few personality tests in my time, Myers-Briggs, Enneagram, Hogwarts house test, and they're lots of fun, but my favorite is the Draw a Tree test. I've had a lot of fun doing this one with kids. It started when I read an article about art therapy and how much you can tell about a person's state of mind and personality by how they draw a tree. Now, I've always believed that everything you draw says something about you. It's only natural. But a tree is a great example. In a moment, I'll have you draw a tree. It doesn't matter how it looks because it isn't about realism or anything like that. It's about what your tree has to say to you about you. So think about a typical tree. Give yourself a little bit of time and try to keep going a few minutes after you consider yourself to be done. That way you can throw in some details, add-ons, and stretch a little. Okay, pause this and draw a tree. Okay, welcome back. I'm going to show you how I paint a tree in my sketch journal, and I'll explain what the various parts are thought to mean as I go along. The next blank page in my journal was brown, so I wanted to use something that would be opaque. Acrylics are the chameleon of the paint world, so I went with that. I'm using siennas, umbers, whatever greens I could find, yellows, titanium white, whatever I had on hand. Before I give you a general idea of what your drawing has to say about you, a little disclaimer. It's important to note that like dreams, drawings can be hard to interpret. As you are the author of your dream, you are obviously the artist of your tree drawing. What that means is you are the authority. Ultimately, you get to say what it means. So consider that circumstance and other things can affect what your drawing might mean in relation to what it usually means in the general population. For instance, people who live in the tropics are obviously more likely to draw a palm tree, or people who live in the desert are more likely to draw a Joshua tree or a cactus. So their drawings shouldn't necessarily be interpreted in exactly the same way that you would a drawing of somebody who lives in, say, Maple Grove, Iowa, or Lindenhurst, New York. The general guidelines given here are a good starting point for understanding how one's state of mind is often reflected in the execution of the simple instruction, draw a tree. The trunk. Is it straight? Is it thick? Does it lean? A split trunk indicates feelings of being pulled in more than one direction. The lower on the trunk the split is, the more it can indicate lack of focus, but also feelings of having options and multiple interests. A solid trunk indicates focus and direction. Damage, such as knotholes and gashes, indicate trauma. The lower on the tree, the younger it happened. Whether the scar is healed over or is newer damage is also telling. Bark indicates attention to detail and uniqueness. If it's particularly gnarly and rich in texture, it shows an appreciation for the stuff of life and maturity, though possibly entanglement in details. The roots indicate stability as well as a grounded life, but it can also indicate immobility or being stuck. Lots of traits have a positive and a negative side, so consider at what point does steadfast become stubborn. Some therapists have suggested it indicates a connection to Mother Earth. I've done this exercise with a lot of kids, and I've never had them make that connection, but it makes a certain amount of sense, so I'm sure it's possible. Branches. If there are good, strong branches, the person feels in control and powerful. If there are broken branches, the person feels robbed of control. If there are no branches, the person may feel powerless or lacking options. Foliage. Lush foliage indicates a rich life. A bare tree indicates deprivation and depression. Leaves changing color indicate soulfulness and spirituality. Flowering trees show optimism, aesthetic sense, and occasionally narcissism. Fruit on a tree indicates productivity, wealth, and maturity, sometimes materialism. Some therapists have suggested apples indicate a need for nurturing. I don't know why apples specifically should mean that. I'm skeptical. One of the reasons I wanted you to give yourself time is so that you could add little telling tidbits. When I do this exercise with kids, they often finish a basic tree pretty quickly, and if they're not accustomed to thinking of themselves as artistic, they stall out and stop. So I encourage them to keep going. The stuff they add is always interesting. Nests. Nests indicate family, home, domesticity, safety. Birdhouses. That indicates craftiness, and I don't mean sneakiness, I mean skill. Bird feeders usually mean generosity. They have good providers in life, or they are a good provider themselves. Birds can mean that as well. They also indicate happiness and musicality. You can put in other animals too. Animals are open to wide interpretation, but the artist can usually tell you what the animal means, such as squirrels indicate playfulness and nuttiness and humor. Raccoons, cleverness, funny, adaptability. Possums. I've never seen a possum in a picture, but I'm told there was a kid who added a possum to his tree because he wanted to be unique. The little possum was hanging upside down, and I'll bet that kid had a unique perspective. Insects, hives. I've never seen this, but I'm told that one little girl drew a beehive and told the art therapist it meant danger rather than honey or busyness. And if it's a cicada year, all bets are off. Wouldn't a swing be interesting? I've not seen any mention of swing in the art therapy literature, and none of the participants in my classes have ever drawn one. But I'm keeping my eyes open because I'd love to meet the person that adds that. I'm also watching for tree houses. I love tree houses. Plenty of people feel a need to include the surrounding environment. If you didn't have time for that, don't give it a thought. But if you did have time, I strongly suspect it would indicate how you feel about where you are or where you'd like to be. Now and again, you get somebody who draws a Christmas tree. My sister did that. Not just an evergreen tree. No, she drew the ornaments, the presents, the whole shebang. I'm sorry to say it's usually thought to be a sign of immaturity. Christmas trees are usually drawn by people who are fantasy prone and inclined to magical thinking. However, I think it can also indicate imagination and childlike innocence. Plus, think about it. If the artist is a kid, they're supposed to be immature. I confess when my teacher said draw a tree, I looked out the window and drew a real tree. But there were a lot of trees, and I picked the one I liked, and I started winging it pretty quickly, so I made it my own. I'm usually pretty slow drawing, but at the time I finished early, so I cooled my heels a bit, waiting for the other kids to catch up. And I started getting antsy, so I began to draw extras. I colored it in, I put in a bird feeder, I added a little knothole. I considered a raccoon, but my tree was a bit of a sapling. I also gave it twirlycopter seeds. I don't think it was actually the kind of tree that drops twirlycopter seeds, but I liked the idea. When I saw the movie Soul, I was delighted because they had twirlycopter seeds in it. I love twirlycopter seeds. So, what's it mean? Well, my trunk quickly split into 3 parts. That seems about right. I didn't declare a major in college till the year I graduated. I had so many credits in so many fields, I almost graduated by accident. I practically exploded out of that university. I drew healthy spring foliage. I was young, so that makes sense too. I had roots. I added a little knothole. I've not really experienced trauma outside the normal slights and blows of childhood, so I'm not sure about that. I added a bird feeder and birds. This isn't an easy exercise to do over and over again because you know what the stuff is thought to mean, so you might just add it because, you want to be that or you'd like it to be that way. But that would tell you something too, so why not? Now that I know what all the elements of my tree are supposed to mean, I don't suppose it can be interpreted quite the same way, but I still think it's worth looking at. You can see that the trunk has considerable lean. I do feel like I've been bending over backwards of late. The bark is rich and gnarly. Well, I'm feeling pretty old and gnarly myself. It's rooted. After all, half the tree is underground. I'd like to think that there's more to me than meets the eye. I was tempted to add a ton of extras, but in the end I settled for a cardinal. There's a cardinal in our red mulberry tree next to our bedroom window, so I wanted one even if it's cheesy. It looks like the tree has a heart. I threw in a couple of twirlycopter seeds too, in the spirit of sharing this exercise. Once you've drawn a tree out of your own imagination, try going out and drawing trees in nature. It's one of the best artistic and spiritual exercises you can do. It will absolutely improve your life. Watch out for ticks, though. I might do some touch-ups with colored pencil. So there it is. There are a lot of drawing and painting tree tutorials online. They can be a little formulaic, but that's okay. You can start there. There are lots of good ones out there. I'll put a few in the playlist. There's one from Disney called 4 Artists Draw One Tree. Oh, I was enraptured by that short film as a kid. If you get a chance, definitely watch that one. It's fascinating. I heard an amusing story. Paul McCartney was drawing with his little stepdaughter, and she asked him to draw a tree. And he drew a giant apple tree, full of songbirds and heavy with fruit. And his little daughter said, "That's a lot of apples." And Paul looked at it and said, yeah, it supports its own economy. She said, "Oh, is it alone?" "Well, it used to be part of a grove of giant apple trees, but there was an earthquake." She gasped. "Were they hurt?" No, he assured her. "They're fine now. They're spreading apple seeds all over the place." I think that's a hoot. I have no idea if it's true. It's a little too good to be true, but it's a great story. There are plenty of other fun personality revealing exercises you can do too, like the path in the woods exercise or the cube in the desert exercise. You can look them up online. They're a lot of fun. In the meantime, draw a tree. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you come back for more Stuff and Nonsense with Ms. Julie.